Hello and welcome to Privacy Cast. Today we have with us Erik Schneider. Erik is a director at Signpost and is responsible for strategy, sales, marketing, and internal processes delivery. He has worked as a senior manager at KPMG, Netherlands. He has developed a suite of solutions around cyber risk quantification. Risk interconnections and board reporting solutions were his part of work when he was at KPMG. He has an MBA in general management from Vanderbilt University and has spent his time in PhD program in finance. He has a BA in history from University of Virginia and a MS from Eindhoven University of Technology. Very big CV, Erik. His mission is to improve decision making in complex environments, seeking simple innovation. And I know Erik from a long time. And when I was in KPMG, I think solution building was something that Erik was focused in. And today, when we talk again, I think insider risk is where Erik has expertise, right? And looking at solutions and the type of technology knowledge that Erik brings with himself, I think we are going to have a great conversation today on insider risk. Moving on to our next speaker, right, Himanshu Gautam. Himanshu is CIO at Mobink. He possesses around 15 years of experience in automotive mobility and finance industry together. Highly skilled in leadership and IT strategy positions. Himanshu with us is an expert in mobility, telematics, connected vehicles. I think if we let's not talk too much. I think I would say Himanshu is an expert in IT technology. And that is where he comes to us, right? And he's with us to get us an understanding and view of what is actually happening, what is he and the organization is doing today to curb down insider risk, right? Because insider risk is everywhere, right? As simple as I think Netflix can today come out and say it was an intern's mistake, right? But how do they, how far can we go with this, right? On what type of documents and data can actually come out of the company, right? So to solve these problems, we will get into in-depth discussion with Erik and Himanshu. Erik, over to you for a short introduction.
Is this an introduction about myself or insider risk?
You can just say hi, guys, from Privacy.
Yes. Hello. I am happy to be here. I am indeed a director at Signpost Six, which is a boutique training and consultancy firm really focused on insider risk. And even within insider risk, we're focused on IP theft, also criminal organization infiltration in the police, in the harbors, in the airports. Originally from the US, I did come to the Netherlands about 8 years ago to go and study cybersecurity. But thank you.
Himanshu, over to you for an introduction.
Thanks, Akarsh. Happy to be here. Great talking to you, Erik, today. My pleasure. So good introduction, Akarsh, and what else I can say. So thanks for inviting me here. Yeah, let's continue.
Looking forward to a great discussion.
Yeah.
So Erik, I think the first question is for you, right? Our viewers want to know, what is insider risk all about, right? What is that big? Is it a jargon? Is it an actual problem for the corporates, right? Why are we listening about insider risk more and more every day? What is it about, Erik?
Sure. So insider risk, as you mentioned, has a very long history, but as a professional field, it's really been limited to the intelligence agencies, defense industries, places like that. But now it's getting more widespread because of the geopolitical situation, also the war for talent. You see a lot of employees being picked off from companies and often coming with IP. In addition, there is more people leaving companies to start their own company. And again, they often take IP. But it really, as a field and as a domain, it really got its start with President Obama in 2011 in the United States. That was in response to Bradley or Chelsea Manning's leaks. There, he in 2011, by executive order, he basically created the National Insider Threat Policy and the minimum standards. Guidelines were created in 2018. And again, if you want to do contract work with the federal government, especially with the military or the Pentagon, you actually need to have an insider threat program. So That's another thing I should point out. In the United States, it's called insider threat. I think in Europe, or at least the way we try to describe it, is insider risk, because it's also about your vulnerabilities as well. And you'll get different opinions about the number of categories that come under. So it's a very immature kind of industry. So there's not a consensus when you in immature industries, and cybersecurity also is one. You'll get different definitions about what's included. But the way we look at it is that it includes data and property theft, unauthorized disclosures, fraud, insider trading, sabotage, and workplace violence. And workplace violence can mean not only physical violence, but also psychological abuse, so bullying and sexual harassment. And I would say the other thing that insider risk is about, most people think, and especially if you come from the US, and don't want to pick on the US, but I'm an American and I can, but most people think it's about case management, really trying to find the guilty people in your organization. And it is, but it should be much broader. And really, it's about caring for your employees. If employees are happy and they're loyal, you really don't have a problem with insider risk. But, and we'll talk about this a little later, many people try to solve the solution with technology, and that's a big help, but it's not everything that you need to really stop this problem or to address this problem.
Right, Eric. I think probably I was actually before this session viewing Signpost Six video, right, where your CEO was explaining what insider risk is, right, and I just read that that headline, right, which says where psychology meets technology, right, and that's an amazing headline, right, and that's an amazing tagline where it opens up a new mindset, right, in terms of technology, because everybody thinks that technology is the solution. And even if you look at as simple things as security, right, obviously security is not simple, but if you say that we still know that firewall can be configured, we still know a lot of things can be done, but without a human intervention, a skilled human intervention, nothing is possible, right? Himanshu, what is your take on insider risk? And today, when you look at your organization, how do you look at the theft, the sexual abuse, right? Or any other kind of psychological abuse, or somebody's taking data away? How do you secure IP?
I think what Erik said is bang on. I want to add on that one from my company perspective. What we see a lot is the phishing emails. That's the biggest threat which we see now on the ground. Like, I know the others are also important, but on the phishing email side, what we have seen a lot, not from now, from the last 3 years, like it has increased. And the level they can go is amazing. We nearly had an incident, but luckily we had our governance policy inside, so we were able to manage it. But what we now have a policy in case anybody gets a phishing email, how to manage it, basically not to open it, or because it can have an exe file or kind of runnable module which can be installed on your laptop or phones. So we have certain policy, but on top of it, even at the firewall level, the security is increased and everything is there. But still, insider risk is still at par, because when we talk about IP theft from somebody who's internal to the organization, that is still a big risk for us, to be honest. We have certain governance modules, basically, where all the emails and everything is backed up for like next 3 years, basically, in case. But these are, I will call it as reactive measures. These are not the proactive measures, right? And then a company like Erik Schneider or other companies are a great help, basically. And then we are learning. We have security partners, advisors, which are helping us at every step. I think we proceed further, and then I can give you a few more examples what we are trying to, how we are trying to solve this problem. And especially on the IP side, there's one which you just said. On the other hand, except IP, it can also be that the infrastructure is also at risk in case you have all your credentials exposed. So of course, we now use some kind of third-party tooling where our IP, ID and passwords are stored or secured, basically, and of course they're separate, not at one place. So these are some basic measures which we take care to avoid the risk. But yes, I can say still it's a big concern for us.
Right, Himanshu. And I think you also come from a technology place where I think there were a lot of issues. If you look at sabotage, I think what Erik was saying, I think that is very far, right? And it's a unique sabotage that happens. But if we just look at as simple things as password theft, right, or somebody has opened the drive links for the web, right? I think we can see a lot of things already happening without a sabotage or a unique threat, right?
Yeah, true. What we also focus a lot on how to use the word that unplanned insider risk, where you have a loyal employee, but he is not aware of security modules, and his laptop is open, and somebody else is is stealing the software, the passwords, and other accessible or let's say really highly IPs, which are which the other person should not get. And those things are also some things on product for a product company where we are highly pursuing that we should not have these basic or unplanned or let's say unknown sabotage where there is no intention to steal the IP, but by mistake it is up in the web, or by mistake it is taken by somebody else who was not supposed to have it, basically.
Right, Himanshu. Moving on, I think getting a fair idea of what insider risk is to the industry and what are the experts' views on that. Moving on, I think what are the threats, Erik? Right? If you look at if we just point out a few threats, saying that what these are the 5 top things that we see. I think we already pointed out, Erik, but still, like, what are the threats that the industry sees, right, from insider risk, right? From first of all, from a holistic level, then let's talk in depth about them.
Well, the threats really differ per industry. I do think sabotage and workplace violence are concerns for most organizations at some level. It's always the dose that makes the poison, but these are kind of low burning threats that are always in place. But for those sectors that work with a lot with IP, so this is high tech, pharmaceuticals, defense, oil and gas, even Seed Research Company here in the Netherlands. They are one of the leaders for agriculture research. There are nation states that want those seeds and the latest developments there. For those sectors that have a lot of IP, the top risk is IP theft. And it's not always a nation state. As I mentioned, it just could be the war for talent. So as the war for talent increases, the threat of your employees taking IP also increases. And it's not so it's not like some huge organization. It just could be an idea that, hey, this will make me, I want to keep this because this will help me do well in my first weeks at the job. I can make a very quick contribution. And for the financial services industry, it's more about insider trading and fraud. And in healthcare, that's where you'll see unauthorized disclosure. Actually, I should say any organization that is dealing with private data. So whether it's PHI, PII, PCI, unauthorized disclosure is probably the top threat there.
Right, Erik. I think PHI, PCI, PII, they all raise a lot of eyebrows today, right, in the industry. And especially with looking at companies which are in healthcare and, as you mentioned, agriculture, right? Agriculture is not something that we have a lot of IP in India for, but definitely we get the challenge, Netherlands being one of the leaders in seed research, right?
And it was a surprise to me, to be honest. I wasn't very familiar with the agriculture industry, but often there are industries that call us. So we have our own industries that we target, but the domain is so new that we get calls, and we got a call essentially from a seed company that said, we have this problem as well. So we're still learning how big the threat is in some industries.
Right. Himanshu, what about automotive industry, right? How do you see insider risk threat in your industry?
I think, like I said, if you take example of, I think year before, not last year, year before, there was a small news coming out of Tesla that there was a guy who was caught at the airport because there was IP theft and possible chance of IP theft from Tesla. So you're hearing this, and further that there was no more news. I think no, it was paid, and then there was no news in the market. What happened? Who was that guy? Why he was doing so? Or maybe it's just true news or false news. We don't know. But you hear that everywhere. And when you say unconscious or unknowingly, when people are just copying a piece of code or any IP material, where there is no intention for them to do so, only just for no intention for any harm for a company, then just for their personal benefit. And that's happening. And that's one of the biggest problem, because there are not many tools that can stop you. Only thing which I believe is awareness, because it can lead you to a really difficult position, even to jail, basically. So you might have really have to go to court in case you're found guilty. So what we are doing, or trying to reduce it, is via education, training, and on the risk side, it's I cannot give you more examples than better than Tesla, basically. Back to you, Akarsh.
Right, Himanshu. I think very well put forward over there. Right. Moving on, I think moving on, then probably one more important task, I think, after understanding those 3 types or 4 types of threats, right, today that we see in the market. But Erik, I think one more threat, I think, that we have probably we can talk more about is, what about the unknown, unknown disclosure of IP, right? How do you tackle that? Like, because we know that, if a sabotage is there or somebody is doing it for personal benefit, but what about things that are happening without an intention?
Yeah, so that was a good catch. I really should have mentioned that as a concern for most organizations. And the question is, why do people make these accidents? Now, sometimes we distinguish between being manipulated, which I consider a phishing email is trying to manipulate a relationship that the user has with an organization. So that's manipulation. But for accidents, if you look at when do you make accidents, it's usually when you're under a lot of stress, when you're tired, and you can't focus on everything that you're doing. So I think those industries that are very intense, very high pressure, work long hours, and they're usually the same, high tech, pharmaceuticals, oil and gas. Those are the places where you will see more inadvertent or unintentional acts, just because people are so under pressure that they make mistakes. That's what happens. And it's culture too. So also what culture can, and I think this is one of the things that we stress, is to really focus on culture. Now, always easy to say, have a very supportive and nice culture. If it was that easy, every organization would have it. Culture is one of those most important things, but it's actually one of the very, very difficult things to get control of. But if your culture, is one that is very toxic, I think people also make mistakes. Just it goes back to that psychology. People are feeling miserable, and they're just not engaged with their work, and they probably just don't care anymore if it's a toxic environment.
So I was trying to add on to you, right? And I totally feel and I won't disagree with you, and I would actually point specifically out to, it's not just about an organization. Also, a lot of times it's most of the time just about a manager, right? And it just ends there, right? Because if you're not getting support and you're getting challenged, and mental health just gets to a place where you are not good enough to take a decision, right? And when you're not good enough to take a decision, I think we all have been in a long term of our experiences, somewhere down the line, someday, right, we were weak, right? And this could have been a challenge to the company's IP, right? So Indeed, right. So Erik, I think moving on, I think I also want to understand Himanshu's take on. Himanshu, if you look at insider risk today, right, and if you think about that, okay, this is my priority, that my IP stays in my company, right? My information stays in my company. What are those 2-3 things that that come to your mind first, and then let's see what all can be done. How do we solve this problem, right, from an organization level?
I think the step one is the coding. The code should be in a place where it cannot be copied, basically. That's a very quick thing from tech point of view, because code is our bread and butter. Next thing which comes is all the communication tools we use, from Teams to Slack, to, name it. They are well secured, should not be and cannot be hacked, those things. That's why we use the best in class in the market. And third thing, if I say I don't want my employee to be become rogue and stealing the IP or doing something wrong, deploying a bug basically in the software where it's just transferring all the euro we earn to a different account or something. So those are the three things which I can think of from insider risk point of view, which I must avoid basically.
Right, Himanshu. Erik, what's your take on this problem? How would you, when you get into the client, right, and there is a call that happens, what is that strategy, right? What are those things, right, that we look at from a strategy perspective, right? That these are the 4 pillars that we are going to answer for you, and then your problem will be 100%, or let's say, will be solved to a greater level. The risk will reduce to insider risk.
Yeah. So I'm going to focus for the moment on data theft, because for a lot of the organizations that we work with, and really, this is a really big problem, and it's been increasing. And I do think this is why insider risk is becoming more of a known issue. But for data theft, as was mentioned, the first thing you need to do is identify your critical assets. And many organizations haven't done that, or they've done that very quickly. And in some cases you can. We've worked with one organization that took 1.5 years to identify, now this is a large organization, but 1.5 years to identify their critical assets. And at first they had thousands of critical assets, but then they worked it down to hundreds. And then they finally worked down to a few dozen. And when you've done that, really, what is critical? What is the thing that if we lose, we'll actually lose our competitive advantage in the future? So really understanding your critical assets. I think there's a problem today, not just in corporations, but also in public sectors, of overclassification of critical assets. So they're trying to protect too much. But first step is identifying your critical assets, doing a threat assessment. So looking at your industry, what are the key threats? So you have to prioritize. You don't have budget to address all of them. And then really taking a holistic approach, which includes technology, but it also includes looking at your culture, for example, looking at your screening process. Just as you identified your critical assets, you have to identify the critical people in your organization. And for the critical people, or the people working, for example, with your IP, you might want to, how do you screen them pre-employment? Also, do you do in-employment screening? So this is an added layer because people change. A pre-employment screening is a point in time. Now, if someone has worked there for 10 or 15 years, you only have this very dated profile of that person. And, people change. People go have stressor events that influence them. And if you look at espionage, and I know espionage is pretty rare, but usually what happens is that and every organization hires good people. So, and that's one of the key points we always try to stress, like your employees, you've hired good people, but people change. People have stressors in their personal lives that can cause them to think differently. They may be often disgruntled because they didn't get a promotion or a pay raise, and that changes them. It changes their loyalty to the company. So to look at your screening process, not only the onboarding as well. So how do you train people? What's in your training? But also your offboarding. So sabotage in particular, sabotage is almost always done by an IT admin who had privileged access. In addition, they probably have put in some backdoors to do their work more easily remotely. And oftentimes, when you look at sabotage cases, the damage was done sometimes within the first 30 days after the person has left and should have had all their access removed, but sometimes even longer than 30 days. They've maintained access. So making sure, having good hygiene when you offboard someone to make sure that their access is removed. But there is some research on insiders done by Erik Shaw. Erik Shaw is a psychologist in the United States. He's worked with the CIA and a lot of other organizations around this topic. And what he found is that insiders follow a very defined path on their way to committing damaging acts. The first is they often have problematic personalities. So they have a hard time keeping their job. Their colleagues complain about them. They have some personality quirks. Then they have some stressor event. So this could be financial, could be a gambling problem, could be a relationship problem. And this brings them to a breaking point, and they start displaying, oftentimes, the insiders display concerning behaviors that people, after they've acted, they say, well, we should have known. We should have known because of X, Y, and Z. Now looking back, it's so clear. But what people see is just a few dots of behavior. And what we really want to do is to collect all the dots in one place. And when you collect all the dots, not saying it's easy, it's still hard. And we'll get into the pros and cons of technology. But having all the dots, not only from technical tools, but also, are their wages being garnished? What else do you know about the person? And usually the best person to have that information is their colleagues and their line manager. So that's why we think general education really about looking for signs of concerning behavior and really doing an intervention then before they act, because most people, even spies, they often have tremendous regret after they've committed these acts. So for me, insider risk is about helping people off that critical pathway, what's called the critical pathway to insider risk, helping people off that critical pathway and making them productive employees at the company again. That's what really they want. That's what the organization wants, but you have to collect all those dots. I will say in the United States, and often what the tools that you can use and what you can do with them often are pretty much determined by privacy laws. So in the US, you can do a lot more. You can analyze text, you can analyze voice. You can't do that in Europe. But what I see most clients doing, or at least large clients, because these are not cheap systems, data loss prevention. Data loss prevention is a good tool if you have very structured processes. Not always, but otherwise it'll be quite noisy. The second is UEBA and entity behavioral analysis, which takes a probabilistic approach. What they do with UEBA systems, as they're called, is they will try to define a profile of how you behave digitally, and then they'll look for deviations of that. And those are good, but you will get a lot of false positives in the beginning. And I know in my graduate project, I worked for a bank trying to use big data tools to find attackers skipping between computers. You will always get, something will always be flagged as most anomalous. And it doesn't mean that there's anything malicious going on. It's a very tough problem. And I was also going to mention, my final point was that I talked about the critical pathway and concerning behaviors. The research suggests that only 1 out of 1,000 people displaying concerning behaviors actually will commit an act. So it's still trying to find that needle in the haystack, but it's the you need to start collecting information into one central body and then analyzing it there.
Moving on, I think we'll move to now. We have spent a lot of time, so we'll move to.
Can I ask a question? Sorry, going off the track,
Yep.
because what Erik explained from the product company point of view, it's like VR. What you summarized, Erik, is a problem that cannot be managed by tech or by legal or by one department. How should we structure the organization to manage insider risk, basically? Where it should lie, it should be under risk department, but risk is mostly finance in the organization like ours. How should we manage it? What should we do?
So knowing where the insider risk problem should be housed and what the target operating or what the operating model should be, this is a very challenging question. Very oftentimes it is placed in the cybersecurity unit because it's technical tools and a lot of vendors sell to the CISO function. We believe that the best place is probably either legal or HR, because this is a human issue at the end of the day. When we talk about how to analyze these reports, you do need some subject matter experts, some technical experts to help these people decode it, or ultimately the business. But if you're going to put it in a functional support unit, I would argue that either legal, because you have to be aware of what you can and cannot do, or HR should take the leadership. But we do see it a lot in the security domain. The problem with the security domain, to be very honest, is that very often, not always, but very often they don't have the cross-functional influence that you would like to have. It requires a cross-functional approach to it. And yeah, you can argue that HR and legal often also don't have a lot of influence because but the business does. So ideally first with the business, then HR or legal, but that's what we see.
Right, Erik. So getting on to the bonus question, and the bonus question, I think we'll start with Erik again, right? And the question is, Erik, if somebody wants to choose a career path like you, right, what are those things that you can tell somebody, right, who is in an early stage of career, right, and wants to make big in insider risk? What are the things that he can do?
Okay, so it's a very new domain, so there's a lot of opportunity. Most people that have entered this domain come from a law enforcement or investigations background, but as I mentioned, there are plenty of those, but what is really needed is a good understanding of humans. I think what's really valuable in this field as well is both to have that psychology and technology kind of background. So not only maybe you're a psychology major, but now you can learn how to interpret all the alerts that are coming from the tools. I think that's very powerful. And yeah, but you will get a lot of offers just from that technical background. But what we're trying to do is to bring in more of that psychology approach. So if you have those kind of interests in technology and psychology, I think this is a great field.
Right, Erik. Himanshu, right? Would you like to share a vision? If somebody wants to choose a career like you, right, a rocket career in IT, right, being a CTO of one company, now becoming the CIO, right, in the group. So what is it that people can do, follow that path step? Yeah.
When you are a CTO and when you become CIO, the tech part becomes information, and how you manage the information. Information is also data. Information is also security. Information is about everything. And that's something you need to get acquainted with. If somebody wants to become a CTO, then he or she must be very good with the technological skills wherein he or she is, but also he or she has to get very good business acumen to become a CTO, I would suggest. And if he wants to become a CIO, one step further, or directly CIO, whatever path is there, then he or she not only do tech, he should also understand IT, or let's say information part of the IT. The best way, the easiest path is to become a CIO is you have to understand the IT part, which is information technology, not the technological aspect of the computer science, basically. And if you understand that, you can translate the business problems into solutions, and solutions into informations, basically. And information can be distributed in reports and whatnot ways. That's one basic understanding you need to have, even if you want to go in this direction. And then next steps is, like I said, you have to have acumen or you have to build the acumen on information security. You have to have a holistic view, and this holistic view will little bit take you away from your technological knowledge. So be aware of this gap, because sometimes people get confused. What is different between CTO or CIO? Or I'm CIO, but I still have a lot of affinity with tech. So that will take you a little bit further away. So if you focus on these two aspects, you will definitely can become a very good CTO or a CIO.
Right, Himanshu. Thank you, Erik and Himanshu, for answering our mainstream questions. And now comes the fun part of the podcast, right? Moving on to our rapid fire questions. So the rules are straightforward. Whoever goes for the answer first has to speak first, right? And if you will not go for the answer, obviously I'm going to call you names, right? Both of you have to answer the questions. It is a rapid fire, but still all the questions have to be answered now, right? nobody will be left out in this, right? Okay, so we will go to the most important question of today, right? The first question, and it comes like this: have you ever? I have done it. I'm not going to say no to this, but like I hope I've left, like, no, it's been a long time since this things would have happened. But yeah, have you ever accidentally, not deliberately, accidentally put data at risk?
No.
Yes, I have. I have sent something to a client that should not have received it.
I will confess, I sent I was sending it to my, like, to my ID, and I sent it to personal email ID, right? And I will confess that has happened with me.
I would also say that I've also kept records too long when I probably should have deleted them. I think I see that a lot in consulting companies where they keep records. They don't always delete them when they should.
Moving on to the next question, the second most important question of the day, by the way. Insider risks, right? We have discussed about it for a long time, but still, right now we are forming opinions after knowledge, right? So insider risk is a security problem or a workplace management problem?
Workplace management. As I mentioned, it's yes, it's about preventing people from doing damaging acts. The only way you can do that is to manage your employees before they get to that stage, before they're at the crime script.
But I think even, Eric, it's even bigger problem than just workspace. It includes HR, human behavior, including your location where you are. Because if your developer is traveling to India or to any other offshore location from Netherlands, you just also wants to have role-based access or location-based access, that he does not have all the access. You don't know where the theft is. Theft can happen basically. But yeah, answer is yes, Akarsh.
Sure, Himanshu. Question number 3, the most important question, and I think finally I have to ask you about data privacy, right? I have not been doing that, and this is the data privacy podcast, so I am guilty, but I have to ask you this question, right? And this is a rapid fire, so you just have to take yes, like, or this option or that option. There's no explanation, and we do not want to answer. We just want that one thing, right? Data privacy versus convenience, right? If given a chance, right, at a difficult situation, right, where convenience could help you a lot, what will you choose? Erik.
I'm going to be controversial. I'm going to say convenience. I could give my answer, but I will just be controversial.
I will go with data privacy. Lesson learned hard way. So
okay. I think Indians always choose that because there is no privacy law here, and once you give your email ID, right, and then the world is after you, right? They'll sell you everything that you don't need, right? But yeah, I think thank you guys for coming on the show. It was a great learning experience as well. Not for me, I hope there was something that you have also taken away today, and probably for everybody who's listening to this, right? We have a lot more similar content, right? Direct content, which solves a lot of problems, right, within the industry for you in coming episodes for us. Thank you, Erik, especially for taking out time, right? I know your busy schedule. I think we've met a few times in the past, and I know you keep your calendars very straightforward, right? And then it becomes difficult to take your time. But I think I learned a lot from you. So thank you for joining the session. Thank you, Himanshu. I know there are a lot of companies that you are working at today, and the amount of technology knowledge that you have, I think probably there's a lot of learning that always happens, right, whenever there's a discussion. So now over to you, Erik, for a thank you note.
Yes, well, thank you, Akarsh. I really enjoyed this. Also enjoyed hearing Himanshu's thoughts on this. And I don't want to let it go that I do respect privacy. But I am maybe just a little selfish. But anyways, really appreciate it, and I think you're doing great work. And I'm happy that you're bringing privacy to India. I think that's a great initiative.
Over to you, Himanshu, for a thank you note.
Thank you, Akarsh. Thank you, Sarah, for organizing such a great event. It's great learning today, and listening to Erik was a pleasure. And I hope you guys continue doing such a great job. And love to be part of a few more sessions. Thank you once again.
Right, Himanshu. Thank you guys.